Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll just give a few minutes for everyone to join and we'll get started at about 2 after the hour. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you to everyone for joining us today for this webinar on the Energizing Rural Communities Prize. This prize has 2 tracks, one for partner and one for finance. This webinar will focus on the finance track. Yesterday, we held a webinar focused on the partner track, and a few weeks back, hosted a webinar that just gave a general overview of the prize. Those previous webinars have been recorded and are available online if you couldn't make it. So yeah, I encourage you to check those out. So like I said, today we'll be focusing on the finance track of the Energizing Rural Communities Prize. This prize is being offered by the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, or OCED. OCED's mission is to help scale emerging technologies needed to tackle our most pressing climate challenges and achieve net zero emissions by 2050. This prize is part of the ERA program, which is the Energy in Rural and Remote Areas program. The goal of our program is to improve energy resilience and reduce the environmental impact of energy in rural or remote communities. This prize is intended to provide funding for teams to form partnerships and develop financing strategies to advance clean energy projects in rural or remote communities. So with that, I'd like to start with just some housekeeping. So first, this webinar will be recorded and will be made available online. If you'd like to come back a reference or if you have to leave early, that will be available. We also will leave a good amount of time at the end for questions and answers. There is a Q&A box, so you're encouraged to type questions you have at any time in that box. We'll answer some in writing as we go, and then we'll verbally address any not yet answered at the end. And then finally, if you have any technical issues, just make sure to verify your audio settings are correct. So today we'll be first going over the goals of this track of the prize, and then we'll be digging into the details of what you need to submit to compete in the prize, and then how that submission will be scored. And then, like I said, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. And then now at this time, I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Jenny at the National Renewable Energy Lab.
Thanks, Sarah. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Jenny Weigel. I work for the National Renewable Energy Lab, and I am on the prize administration team for the Energizing Rural Communities Prize. So today we're going to dive into some of the details specific to the finance track, but we did just want to start with some background information for the overall prize timeline, just so everyone has this to reference here. So as of right now, we are in phase 1, and the submissions for phase 1 are an initial concept that we're looking for both the partner and the finance track to identify what your idea is. Your idea and concept that is submitted as a part of this phase 1 submission will be awarded with the expectation that you will then implement what it is that you're proposing for that $100,000. Currently, this phase is open through May 24th, so you will have from now until that date when the submission period closes to come up with your idea and develop all of the materials that are required to submit here. Phase 2 will follow and that will be the period in which you are actually implementing that program that you proposed initially. And we are just talking about today phase 1. The information about phase 2 will come out at a later date once we announce the winners for the first phase. In terms of the overarching prize goals, these are important to reference as they are specifically included in the evaluation criteria to make sure that the concepts that are submitted are relevant to the Energizing Rural Communities Prize in general. So the 4 primary goals that we are seeking to achieve here are to demonstrate innovative and replicable partnership and financial mechanisms that act as an initial step toward clean energy projects. And we're focusing in today on those financial mechanisms. Second, to better prepare rural or remote communities to secure funding for clean energy projects, either through future ERA funding opportunities or other public or private funding sources. Identify, understand, and further develop activities that prepare communities to complete clean energy projects. And then finally, build trust and strengthen the networks between and within rural or remote communities in support of energy improvements aligned with the Justice 40 priorities. And all of these are both woven within the evaluation criteria for both of the tracks in terms of things that are specifically called out, and then called out explicitly as some of the goals that you should be shooting for in terms of your concept submission. And with that, I will hand it over to Jason Coughlin, who will go through some of the specific details about the finance track.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. Jason Coughlin here with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And thanks again for participating in this finance track webinar. As was mentioned, the purpose of this session is to make sure you all understand the goals of the finance track, what you need to submit to be considered for one of the prizes up to $100,000, and then what the reviewers are going to be scoring as they read through your plans and proposals. And as it says on the slide here, the overarching goal is to improve access to capital for clean energy projects in rural or remote areas of the United States. But I think what we want to do with the remainder of this webinar is kind of dig into kind of what some of these plans could look like. Some of you may already have well-baked ideas, but others may still be thinking, what is a qualifying plan? What is going to be scored? So what I wanted to do is just pick a few of the targeted outcomes on the right-hand side of the screen, and then kind of chat through them with you all. So let's start with the first one. So let's say, for example, a credit union wants to develop a new loan product or offer loans or other sorts of financial support for clean energy projects in one or more rural and remote communities. And so the plan that this institution might submit is how are they going to go about getting ready to offer this financial product or service. Not that they have to have already made loans, but we're just looking for what steps do you need to go through as an organization, and what partners do you need to have on board to be in a position to offer this product in the future. Or, for example, a rural utility or a municipal utility is responding to members' interest in a community solar project. So let's say, for example, your plan is to begin to lay the foundation for what will be a community solar project. And maybe your plan discusses finding a site, canvassing potential subscribers, maybe signing up potentially interested subscribers, so that at the end of the project period, and when we move into phase 2, you can go ahead and launch that project. So I would say, think of this again as laying the foundation for what will actually be the activity, but we're going to score the plan and how you hope to reach the actual implementation of whatever you select. Or one more example before we move on. Let's say CDFI, a community-based lending organization. Let's say they're active in a community, but maybe they don't offer or don't act in this clean energy space. And so maybe their proposal is to add the capacity to be able to make loans or create a loan loss reserve program or an interest rate buy down, some sort of structure that's new to the CDFI. and they're going to use the prize money to build that capacity to be able to offer those sorts of financial products in the communities in which they serve. So again, I think the big takeaway is think of this plan, think of what the reviewers are looking for is your plan to eventually implement in the future, but we're looking for solid plans with solid proposed outcomes, and then the outcomes will come later. So next slide, please. So what are you going to submit? So first of all, think of this as a series of mini deliverables. As you can see here, you'll have a cover page. We're going to have a single slide that will basically capture the elevator pitch, if you will, of your proposal. And so that's a PowerPoint slide where somebody could take a look at the slide and get a sense of what you're proposing. If you put yourself in the shoes of a reviewer, and I've been a reviewer many times, this slide kind of gives me an example of what I'm going to read next. So think about this as your elevator pitch. We also are going to require this 3-minute video pitch. I think sometimes it's nice to have other means to communicate your team and your project and your community other than just through text. And so this is an opportunity for you all to be creative and maybe show things that we can't necessarily capture through a written Word document. Of course, the project plan, this is obviously the bulk of the material that will be reviewed, and we'll get into the details on what this project plan should contain. And then we have here financial statement. You can think of this as your budget. And because the project plan is limited to 5,000 words or less, the budget can be a separate document, which is why we've listed it here separately as opposed to necessarily embedding it into your project plan. But basically, in a nutshell, these are the various documents and the video and the PowerPoint slide that you all will need to upload into HeroX, which would then get distributed to the various reviewers to review your proposal. Next slide, please. So how is your submission going to be scored? So again, off to the left here under the criteria, you can see we're going to score the video, we're going to score the project plan and the budget. And basically each of these categories and criteria have a number of scored statements. And if you just kind of walk across the table on the slide, you'll see that criterion 2, the actual plan, is the most heavily weighted of the 5 criteria. But we did try to be somewhat consistent and not, overwhelmingly overweight certain criterias. But again, the project plan will be the criterion that attracts the most weight and the one that can attract the most total possible points. And so what are the reviewers going to do? How are they going to score each of these statements? As you can see, we're using a 1 to 6 framework, 1 being strongly disagree, and then 6 being strongly agree. And basically, the reviewer will work through your proposal and will assign a number from 1 to 6 based on how well you address the criterion and the sub-bullets under a particular criterion. Next slide, please. So again, here I mentioned this 3-minute video scoring criteria. And I think this is, be creative here, have a bit of fun with this, and just think about things that you can't communicate through a written document or a PowerPoint slide. It could be interviews with team members. It could be a walkabout through the community that you're going to work within. Again, use this as a way to complement what you are going to list and spell out in your Word document. So we're going to be looking for certain things within this video, but certainly, again, be creative and try to envision how does this video complement the written materials that I am going to provide to the scorers, and have some fun, and don't worry too much about the quality. We're looking for content and we're looking for creativity. Next slide. So the project plan scoring criteria, as you can see, there's 5 separate criterion, and we'll walk through these, but at a high level, criterion 1 is relevant experience. So what does your organization or collection of organizations bring to the table at the starting line, if you will? Criterion 2 are, what are your proposed activities? The plan, if you will. Criterion 3 is, what do you expect the outcomes to be, the impacts from your work, and how are you going to measure success? Criterion 4 is the budget, the available staff that you have both directly and through partners, and any other resources that you can bring to bear on the project. And then finally, what is the strategy for not only sustaining the results from this first phase of a given project, but how can it be replicable, and how can other communities and other financial organizations and credit unions and utilities learn from what you are going to implement? Next slide. So again, what we have here for the next kind of selection of slides is the scored statements. So I would spend some time as you go through your proposal writing is make sure that you are answering the various bullets to the right. Again, it says each statement scored on a 1 to 6 scale. So just focus in on, for criterion 1, experience that you bring to the table. And I want to be clear that when we talk about experience, as you can see, we list experience in rural and remote communities. We list experience with working with energy burdened communities, experience with financing and lending and financing clean projects. We certainly don't expect that plans and teams are going to bring all this experience to the table. We fully expect that a financial organization might not have experience in rural and remote communities, and they're actually seeing this prize as a way to create that capability. Conversely, we may see that there's a community organization that doesn't have any financing experience, but they've been active in energy efficiency and other related services, and they want to see if they can partner with finance institutions to bring some capital to bear on issues in their community. So the experience is what it is, and so just share with us what you bring to the table, and then the rest of your plan can talk about the experience that you will gain by implementing the plan, and then what experiences do your project partners bring as well. Next slide. Okay, so this is the plan. As you noticed from the earlier slide, this is nominally the most heavily weighted criteria. And basically, this is what you're going to do. What do you intend to do? What are the milestones? A description of how this plan is innovative, how this plan addresses financial barriers in rural and remote communities. If you want to include a Gantt chart or some sort of a milestone tracking. But again, think of this criterion as the primary document, the plan, how you're going to engage with the community. And again, as I mentioned for criterion 1, once you've written up your draft, just go back and look at the bullets that are going to be scored and make sure that your plan has some sort of response to each of the scored bullets, so that a reviewer doesn't have to give you a 1 because you didn't address a bullet. Okay, next slide. So scoring criterion 3, this is expected outcomes, impacts, and success metrics. Again, reiterating the idea that we don't expect outcomes with this first round of the prize. Again, this is going to be what you intend to do, and you're going to have hope for and expected outcomes that you'll describe in this criterion 3, and how these outcomes benefit the community. We're going to want to see some sort of plan that you have to measure your accomplishments. This buzzword, SMART goals, but just think about creating goals that you can achieve and that are measurable. But basically, we want to see in this criteria Are you being bold with your expected outcomes and your plan to measure your results upon achieving those outcomes in future phases of this potential project, or also with other funds that you're able to raise? Next slide, please. So this is the budget, staff, and resources. So think of criterion 4 is kind of the resources writ large that you're able to bring to bear to this project. We're going to want to see a budget of the proposed plan, what it's going to cost, you know, in addition to the $100,000 prize. If it's a bigger plan than $100,000, where are those resources coming from? You know, what is going to be carried out by your staff versus partner staff versus maybe you're going to intend to hire one or more people with the prize money. So just lay that out for the reviewers so they understand kind of the financial scope, if you will, of the proposed activity. And that last bullet there, as far as your partners, what infrastructure and resources do they bring that complements your organization's current infrastructure? And again, we'll score those 3 bullets off to the right. And then the last criterion, again, the idea behind these activities is not one and done, if you will. We would like to get a sense of, once you implement the plan, that it has legs, if you will, that it's sustainable within the communities that you've targeted, or that it's able to be replicated in other communities. It may be that you're doing a single project, a community solar project in one community. So it's not necessarily that you intend to do 2 or 3 more community solar projects in your particular community. But if it's a utility who is applying for the prize, they maybe do a community solar project in one community, they learn from it, but they add it to their activities and they do more in neighboring communities. Or utilities can learn from other utilities and emulate their community solar activities that were carried out. So think about sustainability, think about replicability, think about impacts beyond the lifetime of this particular prize. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn it back over to my colleague, Jenny, to talk about some of the technical resources that are available for you all to kind of get assistance thinking through your plan. Maybe this is a good resource for you to make sure you're addressing all the bullets, and you can think of these power connectors as a great group of folks that you can bounce ideas off of, a sounding board, if you will, before you submit your proposal. Just make sure that they do a pre-read, if you'd like, to make sure you're hitting on all the criterion. And with that, thank you, Jenny, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, just as Jason was mentioning, I just wanted to make sure that everyone who's on the call is aware of these resources that are available. These are all designed to help you to be successful as you're pulling together your final submission here. So the first bullet here is really to making sure that these organizations are acting as kind of that one-to-one connection for you, helping to build out the community of the organizations that are involved in this prize. Then they're also secondarily hosting some virtual networking events to facilitate some team building, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the team building in a second. And as Jason was mentioning, the office hour support is also a really key resource for any organizations that are pulling together their proposal right now. They are available to provide feedback to you on what it is that you're developing, to help you to understand if you are hitting all of the bullet points that are specified within the evaluation criteria, and making sure that you can be as successful as you can be. In terms of the teaming, there are 2 different ways that you can go about finding additional partners here. And the first is leveraging the forum that exists. And many of you have already asked questions on the forum, and we encourage you to continue doing so, but you can also leverage it to put out a post for additional partners that you may want to work with, other organizations that are already a member of the community here. You can also sign up for the Empower Innovation Network, and all of these URLs will be provided with the the slide deck after this webinar is concluded. So you'll be able to access all of this, and this is also available as an update on the HeroX platform, so you can get access to all of these resources now. But really our intention here is just to make sure that you're aware of the fact that these exist, and you're able to leverage these resources to pull together as quality of a presentation as you can, and then reach out to any other organizations that may help you to facilitate the complete team that you're trying to build. So with that, we will open it up for Q&A with the rest of you. So I see that there are a couple of questions that have come in. So Jason, I think I'll throw it back to you here to kick us off.
Thanks, Jenny. So we'll take these in order. I think, Natasha, you had asked a question about our community wants to install a solar-powered EV charging station in our commuter parking lot. It sounds like this is not the funding source for a project like this. Unless my colleagues disagree, I think as long as your community meets the rural and remote definition and the other criteria, I don't see why you wouldn't want to submit this proposal. You may be asking, like, if it's not finance related, is this more of a partnership track as opposed to a financing track question? So we might be able to maybe help you think through better what category you want to come into, but certainly don't want to discourage that project from participating in the prize. But it may be more of a partnership where you're actually looking to leverage capital as opposed to create a project like a CDFI creating a loan fund to drive capital into the communities, if that makes sense. Are community solar developers eligible? Yes, they are. I think we have a pretty broad definition of which participants are eligible. And as you'll notice, there's very few that aren't. Outside of the federal government, I think we've opened the door quite wide so that we would attract community solar developers. So please do submit that project. And maybe you're going to partner with a utility, or maybe you're going to partner with another organization in the community. So we're trying not to limit folks on the application side. And so that's a long way of saying, as long as you can respond to the criterion as a community solar developer, we look forward to that, that proposal.
And I see the next question here is related to the eligibility of power connectors. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that they are not eligible to compete. So while we have left the window, as Jason was just saying, pretty broad in terms of who can compete in the prize, the power connectors are under subcontract with NREL to provide this explicit support to the competitors directly. So anyone who is interested in pulling together that submission is certainly welcome to leverage those resources, and you do not need to concern yourself with them actually acting as a competitor against you. And I did also want to follow on to one of your earlier answers, Jason, related to a decision on which track a competitor should apply into. There is a line in the rules document that makes this pretty clear. If you are unsure, you can certainly apply for consideration into both of those tracks. But if you do put in the same submission under both tracks, please note that there are explicitly different evaluation criteria, which is the reason that we've held 2 different webinars here to talk about the nuances of each of these different tracks. So just make sure that you can identify which one is the most relevant to you. And if you're really not sure, you can submit under both, and we will just choose which one is relevant for you at that point. All right, I see another question here related to eligibility for rural or remote communities in U.S. states and territories. This is defined explicitly in the rules document as well. If this question is more directly related to if a U.S. territory is eligible, that is absolutely the case, yes. I would encourage you to specifically look at the primary beneficiary when you're noting who is going to be the beneficiary of the activity that you're proposing, and make sure that they qualify as a rural or remote area as we've defined in Appendix B of the rules document. All right, next question here. How many entities can apply under the same application? Is there a lead applicant with listed partners? So I'll start this answer, but Jason then would throw this back to you to see if you have anything to add. We do not have any limit in terms of the number of entities that you are applying under the same application. If there are, a whole bunch of different organizations that are within the same community who are working together and you want to make sure that you note all of them for us, then please do include all of them. The only distinction that I will call out is that you do need to identify a single primary beneficiary of the project with a single zip code so that we can determine your eligibility from that lens. But Jason, I don't know if you have any guidance in terms of the number of entities that they might want to apply into to help them be successful within this track.
No, I would say up to the competitors. I think from a prize money perspective, we would award it to the lead, and then it's up to the lead to figure out how those funds are invested rather than split a prize. But if someone wants to come in with multiple communities under a single application, multiple partners, I think that is welcome. And yeah, don't limit partners because you feel like you've got one too many, because we wouldn't limit you on our side.
Yeah, certainly. And I know there were a couple of questions. I think we answered this in the Q&A box, but I did just want to call it out because I know that this has been an ongoing question in terms of how we define a rural or remote area. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone is clear that this definition is within the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it is specifically a city, town, or unincorporated area that has a population of not more than 10,000 inhabitants. So making sure that the area that you are specifically trying to support qualifies within that. And if you need any support in identifying whether or not the area that you're trying to work within qualifies, I'd encourage you to look at, as I mentioned, Appendix B in the rules document to really understand what are the definitions of the areas that we're looking at, and what is the process that we're going to follow to determine if the zip code that you submit is relevant. All right, and now we have another question here. So multiple rural communities can be listed as beneficiaries, not just one. One is the minimum, but is more okay or better. So in terms of the eligibility, one is explicitly required, and there is a spot for you to submit one community as your primary beneficiary of the project that you're proposing, so that we can understand that there is a single community that will be your primary beneficiary, and we can determine your eligibility from there. If there are other communities that will benefit from your project, though, we'd encourage you to list them out in your application so that all of that information is provided and available, and we can understand what are the broader reaching implications of the project. All right, and then we have a follow-up question related to zip code. How do applicants clarify their organization's location zip code is different than the project zip code? There are two different sections as a part of the application page. So as soon as you start your submission, you will see that there is a place for you to enter your organizational zip code, so the location of the entity that's actually putting in that application, and then the location of the primary beneficiary. And those are distinct, and they are called out explicitly so that you understand that the zip code that you're entering for the primary beneficiary is what we'll be looking at to determine that eligibility of the project, and making sure that the beneficiary is a rural or remote area of fewer than 10,000 inhabitants.
And Jenny, maybe I'd add to that just to put that into a project concept. So from the municipal utility or electric co-op perspective, they could be in a small city, right? But they intend to build a community solar garden in a qualifying community. So it's just to kind of stress that, we expect a lot of organizations who want to broaden their reach into rural and rural communities, may be more urban based. And so that is fine.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It looks like we had a lull in questions here, so I wanted to throw it over to maybe back to you, Jason, to see if there's anything that you wanted to add in terms of other questions that have come up, or things that you want to note for the potential applicants of this track.
No, as I said, don't. I would say use the connectors, use the Q&A, before you strike things from your application that because you think it might not be relevant, run that by the connectors, because we'd hate for you to strike something out of a proposal that not only makes your proposal better, but helps the reviewers score it even more highly. So as I said, be creative with the video. Try to have that complement your Word doc that you'll upload, and using those connectors to road test, if you will, your proposal before you submit it, just to get some eyes on it to make sure you didn't overlook criterion that would have made the difference from you winning the prize versus not winning the prize. So there's plenty of time to create and circulate drafts amongst your team and the connectors. So definitely use those resources. There's no prize for being the first application in, as long as you're in by the last date.
Great, thanks, Jason. Then Sarah, any closing thoughts from the DOE perspective here?
No, I think this was great. It's great to see everybody's questions and interests. So yeah, I hope folks found this useful. As Thomas mentioned in the chat, if more questions come up after the webinar, we encourage you to post them on HeroX so that others can see your questions. I'm sure you're not the only one with that question. And yeah, we hope you decide to apply. But yeah, if there's no more questions, I guess we can close it out, but we'll hold on for a few minutes if folks are still typing.
And
I see one more question that came in on a higher scoring for community ownership. Jason, do you want to take that question?
I'd have to go back and look at the criterion to be sure of the answer. I don't think we have a criterion that necessarily gives more points for a project that's owned by the community versus owned by, let's say, a utility that's not in the community. But I do think you can use that as you answer other questions about experience in a particular community. Obviously, if you're based in that community and know that community, know the energy issues in that community, I think just emphasize those in your response and play to your strengths there, and not so much that we're looking for community-based organizations over co-ops or CDFIs that might be based in the next town over. I think it's the quality of the project within a qualifying community rather than kind of the that a community-owned project would necessarily outscore a utility-owned project who's based in the next town over. But certainly play to your strengths when you answer those questions, because that certainly is a strength.
All right, so if we don't have any other questions here, we can certainly close this out, give you guys some time back, but please do feel free to reach out to us at any time to ask any additional questions and make sure that you understand how we're going to evaluate the submissions that come in. So thanks all for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.